Beneath the grand dome that kisses the skies of Rome lies a secret. Not just a church, not just marble and gold, but a tomb, a legacy, a place where heaven and earth almost touch. This is not just architecture, this is a message carved in stone, a monument of power, of sacrifice, of eternity. Every inch whispers history, and every shadow guards a story. It is said that this place was built over the bones of a man who once walked beside Christ, a man who stumbled, who wept, who doubted, but who changed the world. A fisherman turned apostle, a denier turned martyr, a man whose name would shape an empire and whose faith would inspire billions. This is not merely St. Peter's Basilica. This is the beating heart of Christendom, a vault of secrets, a triumph of human hands lifted toward the divine. Welcome to the story of St. Peter's Basilica, the man beneath who was St. Peter. Before we speak of domes and columns, we must speak of the man whose bones may lie beneath them. St. Peter, originally named Simon, was an ordinary fisherman in Galilee, but Jesus saw something in him. He renamed him Peter, Petros, meaning rock, and told him, "Upon this rock I will build my church." Peter was flawed, fiery, passionate. He walked on water, then sank in doubt. He promised loyalty, then denied Jesus 3 times. Yet it was Peter who became the leader of the apostles, the first bishop of Rome, the first pope. Tradition says Peter was martyred in Nero's Rome, crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die as Christ had. And they say he was buried in a humble grave on the Vatican Hill. From grave to glory, the beginnings. Long before the marble pillars and golden ceilings, long before popes stood in its shadow, there was only a grave, a quiet, unmarked place on the Vatican Hill where the remains of a man, once hunted, now venerated, were laid to rest. In the early centuries when Christianity was still illegal and followers of Christ were forced to worship in catacombs in secrecy, believers would risk their lives to come to this hill. Here, they whispered prayers. They left oil lamps, carved symbols, and scratched Peter's name into stone. They remembered, and through their memory, the legacy of Peter refused to fade. Over time, a small shrine was raised, modest, humble, hidden beneath layers of Roman soil and pagan empire. Then came the 4th century. Enter Constantine the Great, Rome's first Christian emperor. The tides of history shifted. Christianity was no longer a crime. It was the rising light of a new era. And Constantine, understanding the symbolic power of Peter's grave, made a radical decision to build a church on the very site of the apostles' tomb. Think about that. A Roman emperor building a sacred temple not over a battlefield or a palace, but over the bones of a Galilean fisherman. That church, known as Old St. Peter's Basilica, became one of the most revered places in the Christian world. Its altar was positioned directly over the grave. Pilgrims came from across the empire, kings, monks, beggars, to stand where Peter stood and kneel where Peter was buried. For over 1,200 years, it stood as a beacon of the faith. Through wars, plagues, and the fall of empires, it remained. But time is relentless. By the early 16th century, the old basilica was crumbling. Its walls cracked, its columns weakened, its glory faded. What happened next would ignite a new chapter, not just in architecture, but in the very soul of Europe. The popes decided it must be rebuilt, not repaired, reimagined, reborn. This would not just be a restoration, it would be a resurrection. A new basilica, grander than any before, would rise above Peter's grave, and it would become a masterpiece that would take more than a century to complete and would involve some of the greatest minds in human history. A church not just built of stone, but of vision, ambition, and unshakable belief. A masterpiece in the making. The new basilica was meant to outshine all others. Popes, artists, architects, they all poured their genius into it. Donato Bramante was the first to dream big, designing a central plan with a massive dome. Michelangelo took over decades later, shaping the dome we see today, an engineering marvel that still towers over Rome. Imagine the challenges. Building a dome taller than the Pantheon without modern tools. workers using rope pulleys and grit, raising over 36,000 tons of stone skyward. The dome stands at nearly 450 feet tall. From below, it feels endless. From the top, Rome stretches before you like a living museum. Inside heaven, art and symbolism. Step inside, and time feels like it slows. The floor is a vast sea of polished marble. Light filters through the dome like sunlight through clouds. Every inch is drenched in symbolism. The baldachin over the altar, designed by Bernini, is made of twisted bronze columns towering nearly 100 feet high. It's not just decoration. It marks the exact spot where St. Peter is believed to be buried. The walls, not painted, but covered in mosaics so fine they look like paintings. The Pietà, sculpted by Michelangelo when he was just 24, sits in a side chapel, Mary holding her crucified son with haunting calm. Even the Latin inscriptions speak volumes. Around the dome reads, Tu es Petrus, et super hanc, Petrum edificabo ecclesiam meum. You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Power, politics, and faith. But the Basilica is not just art and architecture. It's a symbol of power. Popes have been crowned here. Wars have been declared and forgiven here. It stands not just as a church, but as the nerve center of global Catholicism. And with power comes controversy. Indulgences sold to fund the Basilica partly sparked the Protestant Reformation. Critics asked, should gold be poured into buildings while people starved? Even so, millions still come, not for gold, but for grace. The crypt below, secrets of the Vatican necropolis. Few visitors to St. Peter's Basilica realize that beneath their feet, past the gilded altars and soaring dome, lies a place cloaked in silence, shadows, and secrets. It's called the Vatican necropolis, a hidden city of the dead, older than the Basilica itself. A maze of tombs, altars, and ancient walls, buried deep beneath the holy ground. This is no ordinary crypt. It is a portal to the early centuries of Christianity, and perhaps to one of its greatest apostles. In the 1940s, under the quiet orders of Pope Pius XII, a covert excavation began. Few knew. The world was at war, and yet, beneath the heart of the Vatican, another kind of battle was unfolding, one between history, science, and faith. Archaeologists crept into the soil beneath the basilica with delicate tools and reverent hands. Inch by inch, they uncovered the ruins of a Roman burial ground dating back to the 1st century. Stone sarcophagi, painted inscriptions, pagan tombs, and Christian ones. Layer upon layer of memory untouched for centuries. Then, they found it. A modest, almost unremarkable tomb tucked beneath the altar. No gold, no grandeur, just a simple wall etched with ancient Greek letters. Petrus Eni. Peter is here. Bones were discovered nearby, wrapped in purple cloth, delicately placed in a niche in the wall. Were they Peter's? Not everyone agrees. Some scholars remain skeptical. Others call it the greatest archaeological find in Christian history. The Vatican, after years of careful study, declared in 1968 that they believe these are indeed the remains of St. Peter. And now those bones rest in sacred silence, buried directly beneath the high altar and Bernini's towering baldachin. Above, pilgrims and tourists shuffle across the marble floor, cameras in hand, never realizing that just meters below lies a tomb that may hold the man who walked beside Jesus. Access to the crypt is limited. Few are allowed into the scabby, as it's called. Those who enter speak of an eerie, almost spiritual stillness. The air is damp, the lighting dim, walls bear the marks of time and of devotion. You don't just walk into the crypt, you descend into history, into the bedrock of faith. And in that quiet place, beneath centuries of art and empire, lies a single, unbroken truth. A living wonder. More than just stone, St. Peter's Basilica is a living place. It breathes with the footsteps of 20,000 visitors a day. It's where popes speak, where prayers echo, and where silence sometimes says the most. From sunrise mass to twilight tours, it remains one of the most visited and most spiritual places on earth. 2,000 years ago, a fisherman walked dusty roads in sandals, unsure of his place in the world. Today, his name crowns a basilica that touches the sky. We build monuments not just for power, but for memory, for hope, for something bigger than ourselves. And St. Peter's Basilica? It is not just a church, it is a whisper from the past, reminding us that greatness often begins with faith and the courage to follow.